The Aramaic Peshitta New Testament, brought to you by JesusSpoke.Aramaic.com. Evidence for the Aramaic Peshitta New Testament, Luke chapter 13, verse 24. So in this series of lessons, we're looking at individual verses in the New Testament and comparing the Aramaic and the Aramaic Peshitta and the Greek and the New Testament and several sources of the Greek New Testament. And this particular example is from Luke chapter 13, verse 24, where in the King James Version it says, "Strive to enter in at the strait gate, for many, I say unto you, will seek to enter in, and shall not be able." So that's obviously a very, very well-known verse, one of the sayings of Jesus. Now it's interesting that word gate is different in various Greek New Testaments. In Aramaic, it's the word tar'ah, which is written there, and that's quite an easy one to understand if you know any Hebrew at all. In Hebrew, the corresponding word is sha'ar, meaning gate or doorway. So for example, there's a neighborhood in Jerusalem, a religious neighborhood called Mea She'arim, and that's that same word, sha'ar. So the Aramaic equivalent is tar'ah, which means a gate or a doorway. You can see in Aramaic and Hebrew, the t in Aramaic becomes sh in Hebrew, and the other letters are switched round. So sha'ar and tar'ah are corresponding words in Hebrew and Aramaic. So that's what the word is in the Aramaic Peshitta. And yet, very strangely, when we come to the Greek New Testament, different traditions in the Greek New Testament have two different words for that's translated gate. So in some translations of the Greek New Testament, some versions of the Greek, it's the word poulis written there, and in other completely different Greek New Testament manuscripts, it's written thuras. And we'll take a closer look at those words in accordance later in part 2 of the lesson, but just which is the original? So for example, if the Greek started off as the original, and if everyone started writing in poulis, meaning gate or doorway, and lots of manuscripts had that's the words of Jesus, that's what Jesus spoke, how on earth would someone later have said, oh, although that's what Jesus wrote, although that's what all the manuscripts say, we're going to have a completely different word here, thuras, because those words in Greek look nothing like each other. They're very, very different words, different spellings. They really don't have a lot in common. They sound different, they look different, everything about them is different. So why would somebody switch from one word to another if Greek came first? Remember, all we're trying to do here is demonstrate or prove which came first. So if Greek came first, it's very strange why you'd have two radically different versions of that word. On the other hand, if Aramaic came first, as we'll see, this makes perfect sense, because that word in Aramaic, as we'll demonstrate in accordance later, has two meanings. It's either a door or a doorway, or it's a gate, simply because the doorways often had gates to stop people coming through, and so one word in Aramaic is used. So it's very easy to see, if Aramaic came first, why some translators would translate it as poulis, and why other translators would translate it as thuras. That makes perfect sense. But if Greek came first, this just doesn't make sense. Why would you change to a completely different word, and how would you just happen to have one Aramaic word that replicates both of the meanings of those words? So I would suggest that Aramaic comes first and that Greek was translated later from it, as this example demonstrates. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of examples of this happening in the Greek New Testament compared with the Aramaic. But why the difference in Greek? And just ask yourself that question, which came first, Aramaic or Greek? And with all these examples, it should be clear that Aramaic came first, and then Greek was translated from it, and not the other way around. And so in part 2 of this lesson, we're going to look at accordance and actually demonstrate these different meanings of words. If you don't know Hebrew or Aramaic or Greek, can't read these too well, then part 2 may be a little bit involved for you, but I just want to prove this and demonstrate it, and just keep that question in your mind, which came first, Aramaic or Greek, because all the evidence is that Aramaic came first.